Okay, let's jump in. All right, Charlie, really excited to have you join today. And thanks to everybody for taking time out of your day. Today, we're going to talk AI in finance, what tech CFOs need to, and what tech CFOs need to know about it. Um, with us, I've got the CEO of Monte Carlo Consulting. Charlie will introduce himself in just a moment. I'll give him my intro really quick. I'm your moderator today. I'm the head of partnerships here at Abacum. I've got about 7 years in the corporate performance management and FP&A software space. Helped build a company from zero to Series B in the space, and I'm now part of Abacum. Over the last 6 months, we've actually held a lot of CFO dinners, and I've been able to be a fly on the wall. And largest topic that's come up is AI. And hey, what do we do with this right now? What are some best practices that people are doing? Where do we start? Um, and things are changing so fast. So I'm excited to have this topic come front today and have Charlie share some of his insights. And I'm also happy to share some of the things that I've been hearing too. So, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind, can you give us your introduction, please?
Hey everyone. So my name is Charlie. I'm the founder of MCC, and I've been in this space for 15 years of all things FP&A platform, data. My background actually came from data, and I worked towards FP&A later on in my career. Today, we're basically a fractional CFO shop. Worked with a bunch of tech companies as well. Love to kind of share my learnings in terms of talking with those founders, those companies, how they're using AI, how they're seeing it today as well. And the other side is basically we help kind of the Office of Finance. How do we leverage your data? How do we improve your processes? How do we use software? How do we use AI to streamline your planning and reporting process? Excited to kind of share my learnings with Ryan today and with everyone here.
Yeah, and you guys will have opportunity as well. Feel free to drop any questions or comments into the chat as we go on today, and we'll either address them on the fly or we'll address them, when the time's appropriate or during the Q&A session too. We're gonna hit on three main areas today. So this is by way of agenda. First section that we're gonna talk about is how should finance leaders think about AI, right? Like where do you start? What are people doing today? What's driving the most value, right? How is AI shaping business too? Charlie's actually modeled out, worked with many different businesses to model out um, the spend for AI and share some observations on on how to think about those models from the expense side as well as the revenue side. And then also the final piece and final topic of the agenda is the future of FP&A under AI. We'll talk about things, obviously some use cases, but also there's been some topics about how does this impact the talent that you're hiring for in finance and FP&A. I've heard some interesting things over the last couple of months on how people are thinking about that too. So these are the main topics that we'll be covering, and I've got some questions for you, Charlie, but also would love for you to kind of kick it off. I'll move over to this slide, and when you're thinking about AI as a finance leader, there's probably different places that people are at in the journey today, um, and I don't even know if we're really crossing the chasm yet, right? There's still a lot of very, very early adopters in the space. Is that accurate, or like where do you think we're at from an adoption perspective?
Great question, Ryan. The way I look at it is we are very early. I know everyone's talking about it. Every webinar, every post on LinkedIn is about AI in some fashion. But if you look at some hard data, right? If you do some search, I did some digging around this week. In terms of just the search kind of direction, the searches that you're seeing with OpenAI, ChatGPT, which I think they're the market leader today, it's only about 2.5% of all searches, right? So your kind of standard legacy, standard Google bin searches, that's still nearly all the searches that we're seeing, right? So for me, it absolutely is. We're very early, right? Like you said, we're very early in terms of the adoption curve as well. I myself are using it. I'm using it daily, and even myself, I'm exploring and learning how to use it better and better every day. I think there's a lot of folks using it as a search engine, just asking questions as well. But there's so much more from the AI aspect as well. It can help automate, it can help you give you insight. There was a study I saw where the best users in terms of getting more creativity out of your workflow is treating AI as a partner, right? As an advisor, asking questions, talking to it, right? Especially a lot of these AIs, these large language models, they are trained off text, right? Their specialty is actually being able to kind of generate thoughts, ideas, not necessarily the analytics and the data side, right? So absolutely, I think we're very early. I think it's kind of a once in a lifetime. The next couple of years is going to be fascinating. I know, Ryan, for yourself, you've been through a lot of recent dinners talking about AI finance. What have you seen? What were some of the best questions that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think first point there to be empathetic, right? It is still really early. In the last, there's like six of these dinners in the last, handful of months, and um, there's probably 20 to 30 people at each one of them, and ranging between 100 person to 1,000 mid-market size companies, and definitely people are asking that question, right? Hey, what are you doing? That's the most common question. Everybody, we use Chat GPT. The generative AI is good. Some like half of the room is maybe using it to start to write summaries, but I also sit here, being part of the go-to-market team. I'm exposed to customers that are looking for solutions, and being able to solve a lot of the manual process so people can be more strategic in their roles. Some of it just comes with things that you think are probably sometimes trivial, but just building out all the summaries of every month for all the reporting that gets rolled up to to the um, the executive leadership team or to external parties, right? Those are things that you can do today within platforms, as well as just leveraging some of the tools that are available for you for free. So I think that's the low hanging fruit today for finance that we're seeing. But now uh, you're starting to see uh, people trying to figure out how they can use it to be more predictive too. I think it's still really early on with that part of it. But those are some of the observations. Yeah, I guess when you're thinking for you, Charlie, what are some of the top stories around AI adoption that you hear from finance leaders that you work with in the space and
Yeah,
within
so absolutely the summarization, right? The writing, that's a huge factor. I think a lot of people start with maybe actually a lot of people starts with generating memes and animate images that you're seeing, but absolutely I think the biggest piece where everyone's starting with is asking to summarize and help you write better as well, which I think is critical in the finance side because part of what we do is that storytelling aspect, right? And I think there's a lot of folks who's really good at data analytics, who's really good at model building, but they haven't had enough time or the exposure in their career to tell a great story, write a great email, have a great presentation. And this is phenomenal, right? You know the data really well. You're able to generate, in fact, you can upload variance tables into OpenAI, into Copilot, and you're able to generate kind of the story that flow for you. And a lot of times I find if you use it properly, you can refine that messaging with the AI as well. So that's definitely one aspect of it. But I think even on the other side of it, which is the data, the analytics side, huge impact, right? So we have to start with data, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Everything has to start with the analytics of how we're performing, what does the historical looks like. And I think we're seeing across the board that people are spending less and less time coding, transforming, cleaning their data. I remember 10 years ago, I had to do a terrible ton of amounts in terms of SQL, VBA. These days, what used to take me a day to write in terms of SQL to clean up the data, 10, 20 minutes. I think we've heard a bunch of it even in the coding world. I think there's a term vibe coding now, right? There's a lot of vibe coding where a lot of non-technical folks are able to build apps, build scripts, build calculations, and I think that's really, really fascinating. The folks in the finance side, you might not be technical, but today it's not necessary as long as you know how to ask the right questions. prompt the responses with the AI that you have, like what are your data sets? How should we transform them? What additional sources do we need? And a lot of times you can generate the SQL, the VBA, the calculations to actually clean up the data for you, right? So there's that aspect, but there's also just modeling as well, right? So historically, most people you model out in Excel, Google Sheets. Now you have brand new tools like Avacom, but a lot of times I think people spend way too much time building reusable, maintainable kind of formulas, right? But now, if anyone on this call, if you haven't tried it, you can literally tell OpenAI ChatGPT Copilot. I have these fields, they're columns A, B, C in my Excel spreadsheet. Help me write the calculation that I need to build this model out, right? Meaning
Yeah.
you're going to be able to build out models that much faster. You're going to be able to clean and use data much faster, have better insights, and then be able to tell a better story as well, right? I think that's part of what I'm seeing as well, but there's a ton more in terms of forecasting accuracy, right? Flagging risks, right? It's hard to be aware of all your data at all the times, right? But from your side, Ryan, what out of all these dinners, what was the most unique or impactful kind of experience or story you've heard?
I thought the maybe what was intriguing was more just about um, because all the use cases that you just described are all examples that have come up. Like, where can we start to save more time, right? Obviously, the summarization, but then, like you said, cleaning data, bringing all the data in, helping organize it quickly so you can actually start to take action on it. And then as the data is continuing to come in, having something kind of looking around the corner for you to make sure that that data is continuing to be clean is important.
Yeah.
Those are AI use cases that I think come up a lot in the conversation. How do you do that though? Is like, hey, how are people doing that? I think that there are tools that you can drop in, with Chat GPT, but then some of the modern FP&A platforms. I work here at Abacum, so I'm very biased, but we are definitely a leader in AI for finance. In fact, many of the things that you just mentioned, right, are things that we've built into the tool to make it even easier to do it, right? So you're not having to use multiple applications. We've already embedded Chat GPT for some of the functionality, as well as leveraging other tools and custom development around AI to clean the data, to help you look at your historical data and predict what's going to happen in the future. I think, but then the thing that kind of sticks out to me is just like, how are people thinking about their team moving forward and the people on their team, right? And how that impacts their hiring and the type of people that they're hiring, because now that they have these amazing tools with AI, um, one of the questions that came up was, first of all, having some background in SQL is helpful, right? You can
Yeah.
love AI, but knowing how SQL works is really good, and understanding understanding data really well. So having somebody that is dangerous on the SQL side, um, and then is it easier to hire that person and teach them some finance and accounting versus hiring somebody with a finance and accounting background and trying to teach them how to leverage AI and how to leverage SQL to start to build in all these automations to make the finance team more lean and but also more efficient at the same time. And those are the types of things that kind of stuck out to me on how it's really impacting the people in the business too, and the type of people they're hiring in finance.
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think the that Shopify leak, I think it was a leak, I think last week, where they've changed the way that they hire and think about the workforce now, right? That's a big piece. We can definitely come back to it later in this session in terms of how we think the kind of profile and candidates you need to look at. But I think for them, Shopify was before they hire any single person, they have to make sure that task is not something they can replace with AI today. And beyond that, anyone that you're hiring needs to have the appetite or the experience to be able to leverage AI in their day-to-day workforce or work tasks, right?
Hmm.
And I think part of what you brought up as well, right? We're in the Advocom webinar, right? So definitely bias in that aspect, right? So one of my favorite features is cleaning data. I've spent 2 years of my career in data, kind of cleansing ETL transactions, right? And just making sure that we have the correct data for reporting analytics. And one of the key parts that we have for Abacum is the ability to kind of just use natural language and actually have steps around that so that when we import data, it creates the logic that cleaning, joining data for you so that instead of having someone that's their full jobs was ETL data transformation, which I was when I started my career. A finance person can just do that with the natural language, kind of building steps in plain English, and then just validating the output afterwards to make sure that's what they're looking for. Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Um, when you think about um, just the way that you mentioned a lot of use cases, and I think you said you use AI as you're thinking about ideas. What are some of the other ways that you're leveraging it today? Just are you like what's the I guess the top like the daily versus the weekly use cases for you, and where do you think the lower, like we already talked, maybe the lowest hanging fruit is just the generative AI for summary building, but kind of what's next after that?
Yeah, I think for me, I am definitely leaning more towards on the GTM side, but for sure, a large part of what I do is kind of working with clients and prospects and making sure that the models that we design for them, the data that we use are correct. And it's, I mean, it's never perfectly correct, but to have the most information, and even though I've been in the space for 15 years, I still don't trust myself, right? I know there's blind spots, there's pieces I miss, right? So part of it is when I work with clients, it's allowed me to basically be able to shrink what used to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of research into half an hour, right? To kind of we also have our internal database in terms of best practices designs by industry, by use cases, right? So what AI has done is, if you think about historically, what you had to do is kind of you have to document, and everyone create these large documentations that no one read. And what we've done is by having strong documentation and then wrapping AI around it, it gives us the ability to surface up insights, experience from someone else much faster, right? So someone on my team, let's say Eugene, he's done a number of projects in the, let's say, hotel industry, right? Before he had to basically document that, and I had to go read it, right? Or otherwise, I had to go schedule a call with them, right? Now, looking at that hotel industry, I can basically have a conversation with our AI. What are the typical drivers? I think they should use this. What are the pros and cons in terms of designing it this way? If I want to design it this way, what are the data sources we need? And if we don't have those data sources, well, what are we lacking? What can we do, and what can we do in terms of how we model for clients, right? So that's one way in terms of how I utilize AI today. Just
Yeah, that's
making
interesting.
myself. So go ahead.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's interesting, right? Because it helps because there's so much specialization in like specific industries, right? You have your financials that finance everybody understands, but then once you get into a different industry, there's different drivers, there's different operational models, and that are unique to those industries. And yeah, I like that idea around just uh, getting advice on what the key levers are, right, and the assumptions, and so you can start to move a little bit faster, right? You don't have to be a maybe an industry expert to know kind of what the key things that you need to typically flag as the main assumptions or drivers in the model too. What do you think? So those are some good examples of like of where AI can change the way we're operating in finance. But what like what is it not going to change in your mind, and like what you're seeing? Like what's still going to
I
be?
think a lot of people are, I mean, there's a lot of a lot of fear, a lot of FOMO these days, right? What's happening with AI? Everyone's talking about it could potentially replace their work, their jobs, right? I think certain roles are definitely going to go, but I think it's going to allow us to have the opportunity to do more value add work. And I truly mean it, right? So if you think about FinOps or the Office of Finance, oftentimes there's a ton of FinOps tasks that you're doing. There's a data collection, moving data, cleaning data, right? Transferring data from one system to another, making sure they tie out, right? Those processes I'm already seeing it happen in terms of getting automated, right? There's a bunch of phenomenal brand newer accounting systems we're seeing today that we partner with today that making great headway in terms of improving those FinOps accounting processes now. What that means is a lot of us does have more time to actually analyze the data, ask the questions, and actually start thinking about how the business should move. I'm really excited because it actually allows us to be a lot more agile, allow us to actually get more into a strategic role faster. If you think about 10, 15 years ago, I had to do groundwork on the data side for 2 years, then model building. To me, I think now you can kind of get to a place where you start asking questions, start looking at the business from a strategic standpoint within a couple of years, right? And to tie that to a realistic example, earlier this year, I was building a model for a client, and my team actually was showing me what they found. If you went to ChatGPT and just asked how to calculate LTV, it will give you five, six, seven different ways. They're all mathematically correct, but some of them would never be used. It doesn't make sense from a functional business standpoint. You're not going to be able to explain to investors why this. Yes, we know the math works out, but those are the cases where we still need that human at the end to ask the questions and decide which methodologies, which actions we want to take, right? Which strategies we want to go with, right? I don't think that's ever going away. But what's really cool is we're going to get data, better data, faster data to make those decisions faster. But at the end of the day, you have to review the outputs, ask the questions. In fact, I think it actually makes you a lot more collaborative, right? Instead of sitting there siloed, building up the model, having the running the data analysis, you can start. I don't think we're real time yet, right? But it's near real time. You can start asking those questions, looking at the analytics in a room, right? Having those business partner meetings, immediately having insights. Because if you think about historically, your CEO, your head of sales would tell you, I think we're going to go this direction. And then the finance team go, yes, give me 5 days. I'm going to model this out. We'll see what it looks like. And then we'll figure out if this is the strategy we want to go with. Now you can ask those questions, be able to answer what it looks like in 10, 20, 30 minutes, and then regroup and have a faster kind of output decision, collaborative kind of session around it immediately, right?
No, I like that. That reminds me of a quote that I've heard before, and it was funny. I was just on a call with a finance VP of finance that said half of this, but it's like accounting is science and finance is art, right? And having the ability to more flexibility on how you're going to approach things. But like you said, that LTV example is great. It just maybe you only know of a couple ways to calculate. It gives you three more. You can look at which ones make the most sense for the business, and then make the decision on also what looks the best for investors too for that calculation, and use a couple of them. And yeah, that's great. And then also, before we move on to the next topic, I guess last thing is, you're setting goals for the business, right? You're getting input from people, but ultimately, you're building out this forecast, and there's people that have to be accountable for it as well, right? And there's always these external factors too, because you're driving performance there, and you have ownership of it. Um, you can't blame the AI for it.
No, no, you cannot, right? You still need to have ownership of the work or the actions, right? It's just a tool at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's move here to the next topic and make sure all right, got a few folks. Thanks for dropping some things in the chat. Um, let's talk about how it impacts the model, right? When we think about um, for business, just like how does this impact, like if I'm the CFO, there's the view of, okay, I'm now, or maybe I'm the VP of finance, but or maybe yeah, maybe I'm the CFO and the CEO is like, we need to add this AI in, or we need to add this stuff in for go to market, or we're adding this into our product. There's that side of it. How do we forecast for expenses? I've seen like 50 different ways that AI models work as far as like pricing models go. Maybe that's one side of the coin, right? And then what are some other things that we need to think about when we're considering um, how to forecast out AI for our business and how that impacts the model?
I think there's two sides of it, right? So there's the side of kind of non-tech, maybe non-AI companies is a better word, non-AI companies that's using the AI platforms. How do they think about their business? And
Mhm.
ultimately, FP&A forecasting modeling, they're just a derivative or an output in terms of how you want to think about your business, right? So there's that side, and there's the actual AI companies themselves, and that's a completely different can of worms, right? What I've seen on the just the non-AI side, for them, right, the whole piece is about how do you think about AI, how to utilize AI, right? So I'll give an some examples of what I've seen. We're both in GTM, right? So I'm seeing it already. There's AI dialers and kind of BD tools out there now, right? So it's not replacing kind of your headcount need for BD. What I've seen is now instead of you spending 3 years doing cold calling, now you can almost switch to an AE role almost immediately, right? Higher value. And I think a lot of folks want to get an AE immediately, right? So on the P&L, right, where you're seeing is potentially there is lower headcount costs on the BD side. But now you have more AEs, your commission goes up, which is a good thing. More commissions means more sales, right? But then you have higher kind of OpEx costs in terms of the software spend on these BD tools. And for a lot of these kind of, especially this example we're talking about in terms of um kind of these BD tools, a lot of them needs to be trained. So a lot of times they'll have this 2, 3 months training period, and then sometimes there's professional services involved as well, right? So in that case, right, for anyone that's on the call, right, so general accounting, this would not be an OpEx, right? You capitalize that investment so that you've trained the BD tools so they can sound like your reps, your AEs on the call, trying to generate business for you, right? So that's one side what I've seen kind of outside the AI companies. On the AI side, it's very different, right? So I mean, in terms of how a lot of these business model works, they're completely different. Significant CapEx investments, significant requirements on data in terms of manpower, in terms of data centers as well, processing center as well, right? So you see this with and part of it is there's a significant kind of increase on the AI side in terms of the COG side as well. There's a lot more kind of inference costs. And for anyone that's on the line, in terms of inference costs, it just means the usage of the AI models to kind of generate the output. So not the training anymore. So anytime you go on ChatGPT or Copilot and ask a question, that's inferencing, right? The models are taking your inputs and they're producing an output, right? So if you're a wrapper around ChatGPT, Copilot, and you're using them as the brain, right? You have to pay Microsoft, OpenAI, you have to pay Anthropic a cost, right? And that can be a significant cost, right? Because it's usage based, right? And that can fluctuate drastically based off what you're seeing with technology. If everyone remember a while back, everyone was freaking out in terms of DeepSeek from China, right? So before that happened, the cost of kind of calling the API calls from ChatGPT, I think it was somewhere from $15 to $50 for every million calls or tokens. Afterwards, because of what happened with DeepSeek, the models changed drastically. I think it's dropped down to dollars or cents now in terms of what the inferencing cost looks like, right? So for the finance leaders in this side, like working with AI-based software, they have to model that out, right? And a lot of times it's really hard to forecast. Like the tools that we've used in the past, historical averages, trailing 6 months, they're not gonna work anymore, right? You gotta have a much closer relationship with the data team, with the tech team to understand what that looks like. And because it's so unpredictable, you need to create a what if scenarios around them, right? But beyond just COGS, right, in terms of expenses around that, there's significant investments you have to make towards this infrastructure as well. Data, last year, OpenAI, I think they raised 7 billion. And from what I understand, that transaction, a third of that was around just basically data acquisition. I didn't know you could spend $1 billion on just data. And if you think about what Microsoft, Google are talking in terms of data centers, they're planning data centers that are 1 to 10 gigawatt power. I don't know if you guys know what that actually means. The average nuclear plant in the US produces 1 gigawatt power per month. So the size of what these investments looks like are enormous, right? It's been a fascinating journey. Anything you've seen, Ryan, on the short term, long term?
Yeah, I mean, you just I've invested and implemented go-to-market tools for myself and for my teams, and I also see, pay really close attention. I've worked to the startup space and SaaS businesses. There's a ton of pressure to have AI like within your product. Um, it's almost a requirement to raise money, right? That's a good thing and maybe a bad thing too, because you're going to get some AI capabilities that are shoved into products, and they're going to try to charge you for them that really aren't adding value. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is how do you measure success with these tools, and how much of a runway do you really give it um, to monitor that success until you're like, this isn't working or this is working. Um, so I'd say be careful with that, and definitely double click in to make sure it's functional. It's going to add value. Start with the quick wins, right? Um, as well. I think your other point too, it's like things are changing so fast on the billing, and you could have 5 different AI vendors. They all bill differently on the usage or other different types of usage. And so I think it just the call out to the way that you're forecasting out expenses. If you are trending, right, it's hard. If you are trending your expenses or trending your assumptions, like I hope that you're rolling your forecast forward as often as you possibly can. So then you can see how things are changing quickly, and you can be on top of that change, um, and understanding how it's going to impact your cash flow or the rest of your business. And so I think it just shows like the importance of some of these just use cases, I think, within finance that people typically only get to like a quarter every 6 months because they're so time consuming. Like now, how do you leverage your technology to make sure that you have rapid insight to see that change and monitor that change within the business? So you can unlock things like a rolling forecast every month, or just like a live forecast too, while actuals come through that you can monitor, and then have the system, like you said, Charlie, alert you when things are like looking off, right? When there's potential anomalies that are popping up, too, that you should be able to address immediately so it doesn't get out of hand, as well. Because I've seen some articles like people aren't paying attention to their. He was actually Jason Lincoln from SaaStr was talking about how he was one of his vendors for 3 years, and then all of a sudden he wasn't paying attention. 6 months in like 3 months he got charged $50,000 because of some
Yes, I
usage
saw that.
some
Yeah.
usage stuff, right? That stuff's happening a lot more often. Um, and you're going to catch it late, and then you have to start fighting. Then you lose control, right, of that expense too, because you've already paid for it in some cases. So, yeah, good call out. I'm
You
watching.
have to be a lot more agile. far
Mhm.
more agile. Things are moving a lot faster, right? So if you're budgeting once a year, right, it's not enough. If you're forecasting once a quarter, it's not enough, right? So you need to be able to streamline your planning process, actualize them much faster so that the day you close is the day you can reforecast and aim to have that reforecast produced within days so that you can start course correcting, you can start pivoting your strategy as fast as you can, right? And part of it, like you said, those impacts, those changes can be drastic because things are moving so much faster. I think for Jason, for that example, I think that destroyed the business. I think they're done now, right? Because they weren't aware of their costs and they weren't managing it fast enough. They weren't course correcting fast enough, right? The other side is, I think a lot of these things are very unpredictable. The answer is not to just blindly hope for the best. Hope is not a strategy, right? You really have to start thinking about what are the worst cases, what are the best cases, and be able to plan and have those modeling scenarios and not just have a best worst case on a budget annual perspective, but every time you reforecast what the latest information that you have from the different department owners, the sales team, the data team, the tech team, reforecast, but also reforecast multiple scenarios as well, right? It's it's fascinating in terms of the different drivers, the different models as well. Like you said, a significant CapEx investment as well, right? A lot of these tech companies, they have to basically justify to the investors why we need to train a model for 1, 2, 3 years before we go to market, right? And because you don't have much data for training that model, you have to show those scenarios what it looks like for your investors and then basically be able to justify how you're going to basically be able to lower that cost, have an ROI in terms of the investment as well. And it's a interesting time. I'm seeing a bunch of new revenue models as well. There's a lot of use. I think historically a lot of recurring usage revenue, then now we're seeing kind of usage based. Now I'm starting to see kind of outcome based modeling in terms of billing pricing as well. And for that, it's a whole new territory. I think that is why the what if scenario is even more important. If I look at my customers, if I switch from usage to outcome, meaning a percentage of the revenue, a percentage of their spend, right? What is the likelihood of certain customers are going to churn? What are the likelihood of certain customers are going to stay with us? And if they stay with us, what does that potential revenue look like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, so I guess the example that you're giving is if like more on people putting the AI, like putting AI or into their own product to help generate more revenue, and instead of an upfront cost, it's how much more a percentage of the revenue that that's going to be ongoing, and that's kind of how that contract works. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly, right. So it's fascinating. It was the first time I've seen something like that where the a part of so the company that's building the platform, a significant value of what they have is the core product of someone else, right? Because we're so correlated, it's almost like a joint venture, right? So and then one can't have the other, right? You have that relationship. So what ended up actually agreeing to was the provider for that technology, the AI in the middle, they got a percentage of total revenue for this company that wrapped themselves around that product, right? So
Got it.
it's not recurring, it's not usage, it's a percentage of the actual outcome, right?
Hmm. Okay. Uh, couple minutes left here. When we talk about the future, maybe one point we talked about, yeah, future of FP&A under AI. What's kind of our your parting kind of point here that you'd like to make in the next for the next handful of minutes?
I think for me, a lot of people say AI is the future. I would really say it's now, right? I'm sure I've heard of it's cliche as well, but it really is the case, and it's all industries. I'm seeing this across CPG, manufacturing. I'm seeing this in farming, right? So the technology is here. It's here to stay, right? It's a huge part of the future. All these big tech, all these companies in their public reporting, they're announcing they're making significant investments to it, right? the thing here is we're also really, really early, right? So if you haven't started, don't worry, don't have to fear, right? You're very early as well. Like I said earlier, OpenAI only has something like 2.5% of all search kind of volume, right? Get started. There's lots of basic things, right? Like Ryan said, summarize your emails, use it to tell a story, upload a table of data, see what analytics, what insights it has, right? Start using it, start exploring new tools that has AI baked in, right? So really question all the tasks and process you're doing day in, day out, and ask yourself, can we automate that with AI in different fashion, right? And
Um,
what I find is once you get in, it's almost addicting. You'll find new ways in terms of using it very quickly.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, right, it's there's a lot of tools to use, but then there's also finance specific tools. And for the folks here that are Abacum customers and partners, right, you know, um, how important that is within our platform and our roadmap. But for folks that have never seen Abacum before, uh, having AI functionality, especially a lot of the things that we talked about, like cleaning your data, looking for anomalies, helping you summarize your information off of tables, right, off of scenarios, variance analysis, and then also helping you forecast. Those are all things that are built into our finance platform where we kind of put the bumper lanes on for you, so you don't have to go and figure it all out yourself. It's all there in a guided path, um, on those different types of workflows, too. So if anybody's ever curious, reach out to Charlie, reach out to myself, and we'd be happy to just chat more about specific use cases that you can leverage in AI. And like the point is like, it's good to just start, even if it's small, and then continue to build from there. So thanks again, Charlie. Really
You.
appreciate the time. And thanks everybody for joining today. We'll share out a recording as well. And if you have any additional questions, let me share my last screen here. You can find myself and Charlie on LinkedIn. And lastly, if you're in Toronto, we're going to be hosting a dinner. We'll share this information out with you all within the next week. We're hosting a dinner that you guys would be invited to, similarly to what we talked about in the beginning of the call. It's a dinner for CFOs, VPs of finance, directors of finance, kind of office of the CFO, to share ideas, topics around AI, other topics too around hiring, and how to deal with things like tariffs, right? Just the latest topics. We'll share that out, and feel free to reach out too if you want to save your spot. Typically, the dinners max out at about 20 to 25 people, and there's always kind of a waiting list too. But we look forward to seeing some of you there. And thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.